Hi friends, I'm just going to do a quick overview of the create, read, update and delete functions using MongoEngine. I'm going to use the book ODM project just as an example. So what I have here is I have the the website, and what I'll do is I'll just navigate to the start there. So we have the main site. Okay. And then I have the code here with the template. So I just want to kind of talk about creating classes, creating the functions. So create, read, update, delete, and then creating the templates that the front those functions. So when we create these functions, we have to think we need the class as exists, or we need to create it. We need the kind of the relevant function using the Mongo engine methods that exist. And then we need obviously to create the front end part, which are the HTML pages, the Jinja 2 templates. Excuse me. So we have just the main page here. There are a few features that we won't need to cover, like pagination and stuff. But essentially, what it does is it reads the database, just checks to see what's in the database. And if we go to the database and have a look at book 2 ODM, for example, it consists of books that have an ID, a title. So that's actually, if we do this, we can actually do this. We can actually see what they are as well. So object ID, title to string, the author, which is a string, the year, which is a 32-bit integer, ISBN, 64-bit integer, user, which is a username, which is a string, a short description string, a comment string, and rating from 1 to 10, which is an integer, 32-bit. The genre, which is a string, the private view, which has to do with whether other people can view your books, and then a thumbnail that's taken from the Google Books API. So let's just cancel that. So that's what the database looks like in the back end. Essentially, a collection called called book that has these documents in it. Okay, let's go back to there. What we can do then is we can edit a book. Click on that, or let's go back, or we can delete it, or we can go to menu and add book or search book. So we'll have a look at these in greater detail. So let's start off then to get this to work. Obviously, the main part of this is this piece here. We need to install Flask MongoEngine. So pip install Flask dash MongoEngine gives us this. We from Flask MongoEngine import MongoEngine. Now we also can add a few additional things, but it's just keeping it simple. The rest is you recognize from Flask. There's certain functions or methods that we want to use. It's just loading the local .ini file that contains the the URI, the URL to the database instance on MongoDB. Here, what we're doing is instantiating the Flask application using the secret key, which is also stored in a .ini file. So these things was just kind of the usual things that we do when we create Flask applications. Now, for us to be able to use and connect to the database, we need to do this. So what we're doing here is we're getting the URI that we've copied and pasted from MongoDB. So let me go over here just to show you. We can go back to Atlas, and then we can connect, and then we use the yeah, we can use this, but what I prefer to do actually is this one. So which one I generally okay. So the one I normally use is this one here that has the username, the password, and then what we put here as well is we add the name of the database. So this is missing the database portion. So this just says connect to wherever. But what we need to do here that's it. There we go. So test is the database name. Apologies. So username, your password, connecting to MongoDB, and then the name of the database. And then it can be good to add retry rights equals true and W equals majority. But that's essentially all we need to do. And we can change the name of this to anything, and it will automatically then create the database. So this string is stored in my .env file with my username, my password, and the name of the database I'm connecting to. So what this does is it gets it from the environment, which is the .env file, and then it uses that when it configures the application to connect to MongoDB. So you see here the name of the variable is used here as the host string. And then we instantiate it using db equals MongoEngine app. So that way we know we're connected, and hopefully then without any error messages. So that's the kind of the setup. The next thing that we need to think about is we need to create a class. So think Django models. In other words, what should the database model look like? The table with its fields. In this case, we're talking about the collection and the fields then that each document has within that collection. So what we do is we define a class. In this case, a class called book that sorry, is instantiated from, or actually so extra helpers in the creator class, we use a variable db.document with capital D. So we're creating our class called book, document db.document is a variable, and that's important. And what this does then is this is the name of the collection in the database. So let's go back to collections. Let's have a look. So, for example, book, that is the name of the collection, which matches that. We'll see that in a moment. You can see that's a capital B, and that's a lowercase b. That's because when I instantiate this, I am using a lowercase b. So just bear that in mind. But here we're saying that if you create anything of book, then these are the fields we need. And you can see they match. So we have the title, author, year, ISBN, short description, all the way down to there. And then we say what type of field are we talking about. So you can see when I click edit here, we can see the field types, the field descriptions. So db.string field, and then we have default parameters. So I set default, in other words, to none, can be empty, and a maximum length of 250 characters. Author is also a string field, so db.string field, default, empty, max length 250. The year, so we can see here the year, 32-bit integer, is an integer field, max length 4. ISBN is also an integer field, an int field, with a max length of 13, that in the database is stored as a 64-bit integer. Then we have short description, string field, again, default is empty, max length 2000 characters, because we write a short description about the book. We have the username, in other words, the user who added this book. I'm not creating a relationship between this and the user class. Essentially, I do that programmatically. The string field, it's a requirement, and I just set it now to default to book ODM. Now, in my full application, obviously, that wouldn't be the case. The creation date, which could be used for statistics later on, how many books have been created this month, and so on and so forth. The creation date, DB, and it's a date time field. And the default is date time now. And it doesn't see that it's being used, so should we see if I made changes? I must have. Okay. And then we have a rating. Now this is interesting. It's an integer field. However, you see choices here. So what I'm saying is this is an integer field, but you can only enter an integer of 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10. So this is a good opportunity for, let's say, I'll go into here, just edit, and the rating then is a drop down, or well, a drop down selector here. So that is a way of handling that. We look at that in greater detail. The genre is a string field. The private view is also a string field. Could have also been a boolean. And then this book thumbnail is a URL. We can ignore that at the moment. This meta tag says that I want to auto create the index, and that's done by default, just paranoid setting. I want the indexing to be done in the background. So let's say we are creating, we're uploading a million books. What would normally happen then without index background true is that MongoDB would do the indexing before giving control back to the application. So as users, we would sit here, twiddling our thumbs until that was done. Here we're saying, do what you need to do, but do it in the background and give the application back control. By default, the ID, if we look at this, here is indexed. And what we can do, if I click on indexes, we can see there are two. There's ID and title. So here, index title, because we want to speed up the search of that. And then also I've decided to order it so that I'm telling the database, regardless of which order the documents are created, just make sure that you order them based on the title. So basically, first we create a class, then we define a function, and then we create our template. We created our class. We start off then with the initial read function. Essentially, the main page, going back to here, just to show where we are, we can see this is what happens. So, and we can actually, so I'm using pagination, which is this here, but we can ignore that for the moment. What's important though is books pagination equals book.objects. What we're saying is, it's very simple read, give me all the objects of class book from the database. So it will give me, if we go to, give me that, it will give me that, it will give me all of these because I'm asking for all of them. Now I could filter them out by adding book.objects.filter and then say I want a specific ID or whatever, but we'll wait with that in a moment. So all we need to do then is book objects. Now if we look at the index of HTML file, what this does, sorry, let's go back to this, and then it returns. So we get all the books, and then we provide them to, and in this case I use pagination. So what it does is it takes the book objects and uses the paginate method to give me 5 books per page. And then we pass that on. When we do return, render template index of HTML, we provide that then books underscore pagination, books underscore pagination, which will be the name that we will use in the template. It's just easy to use the same name. It just causes less confusion. Now here though, it kind of works, so you can see how easy this is. Now if we look at index.html, in here, and we can ignore that piece there, we look at this. So we've passed books underscore pagination. In other words, all the items, all these books, because of book.objects method, saved it to the variable. We are then saying we want to iterate through the book in books pagination and then provide us with this view here. And what we also want to do is to populate a bit of information. We have book.author and book.year. So for each object then, I say I'm getting book.author. Here is one object where we have, so the title, the author, and the year. And that's how this works. So we have book title, we have book author, and book year. And that's how easy it is. So if we look at here, we have, first of all, the class. We say whenever you create a book, an instance of book, these are the fields that are required. We have our function. In this case, we're only doing a read. That does a book.object, so get me all the objects in the database. In other words, all these books. And then provide them to our template, in this case index.html, as books underscore pagination. And then here we basically iterate through the books underscore pagination items. We say for each instance, book one, book two, so that's one instance, that's another instance, that's a third instance. Do the following: create the following URLs and give me the book title. Please give me the book author and the book year. So book.title, book.author, and book.year. And that's how easy that is. That's how easy it is to create a read function. The next thing then is we obviously want to add books. So what we do here is basically what we do is return render template add book. So let's go to the menu. Let's add a book. There we go. And you can see we have a number of fields that we need to fill in. What this does then is it renders this, and I'm now going to fill this in. I'm going to call this Flask Fun, or just Flask Fun. Author, I'm just going to call myself Gaff, book published 2021. ISBN, let's do the fake one. Book description. Fun with Flask. I love this book. Book rating, I give it a rating of 9. So if I try to enter anything else here, it won't allow me because I'm limited to, but say 9. So let's have a look at the add book template. What it does is it provides this form, the form and the fields. And we can see then that we have a URL for save book. So in other words, when we click add book, that is what will be the action for the post. And then we have each one of the fields. They have a name title, name author, name year, and there's a fair amount of validation going on. There's required fields, minimum, maximum numbers, max length, and so on. So nothing really too fancy. And then at the end, we have the submit button, which is action, and to add the book. And that's this button down here, which will kick off this action here that we defined. Now let's go back to here. So let's say now I click on add book. Actually, what we'll do is before I click on add book. So when I click on add book, remember that it will then do a save book. The whole idea here is, sorry, add book, whoops, apologies, save underscore book. We have save underscore book as our function. And what we're saying is that it's using the method post and save book. So if I hover over this, I should be able to see the URL, or maybe not. Okay, anyway. But we can see then that what we're doing is we are instantiating an object called book based on the class book. And we're saying that these are the following items. So this form will be filled in with the title. So from the request form, get title. Remember the names. If you look at add book, the name is title, name author, name year. That corresponds to title, author, year, and title, author, year. So we'll actually collect these from that form. Title, author, year, ISBN, short description, comments, rating, genre, and so on. And that will be saved to the book variable. And using the following fields. Now, once we've done that, so when I click on this, We can ignore this. This is just Flask debug toolbar. We now have added a book, and I call it Flask is Fun, which I think should be there. There, Flask Fun. So that's our book, Flask Fun GAF 2021. So what it does is, it within this try except clause, it does a book.save. That's how easy it is to create a new I don't know, a new document in MongoDB. So all we do is save we want to create a book, a new book based on the class book, filling in the fields that we filled in the form field, save it to book, and then we just say book.save. So using the save method, and MongoEngine will then save it, which it has. We see here that we can view it here. So that's easy enough. Next, then we have update. So on this page, looking at index.html, what we have is we have the URL, or two URLs here, one to edit book and the other to delete book. And what we provide as well is the book ID. Now, why do we do that? Because when we click on this here, you can see if I hover, it will give me down in the lower corner, delete book and then the book ID. And here it will give me edit book and the book ID. So we want to pass it along to our function to be able to do that. Going back to app.py. So what we do here then is edit book. I click on that, and we get the same look that we had when we added the book. However, now we are using edit book instead, which I need to find in my templates. There, edit book. So edit book looks very similar to add book, strange enough. The only difference is that it has a different form action. URL for update book, giving it the book ID. But otherwise, everything else is the same, except that the value here, as you can see, what we do, and let's go have a look at the app.py. So we've called this then with book.objects.get. So we're getting a single item with the ID of book ID. So when I'm going to hover over it, we're given that ID. And then we use that then to render the template edit book, which is there. Now the difference between this one and add book, if I go to add book, we can see that there are no values here. I haven't defined a value. But in edit book, we're populating the value. Now there's a fields here with this. And what we're saying is, given that this particular book, I want you to populate with the following values. So book.year, book.author, book.title, and so on. It's very, 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 very simple. And just to show you then that the book rating, for example, is, so the input field is type number, minimum 1, maximum 10, so they're validating that. And the value is book rating and is required. And then we have the button at the bottom. So quite simple then. And then when we update the book, let's say, you know what, I thought this book was absolutely brilliant, so I'll give it a 10. Click on update book. And we then have there. Now what it does is, when we click on the edit book, because we're doing the update book ID, what happens is it then gets update book with a book ID with method post, which is good, and it then gets the book with the, let's see, the relevant ID, as I said, and it then, in this case, creates a dictionary of the values. So previously we actually used a tuple here, but here we're actually using a dictionary. It works in a similar way. We have title, author, year, ISBN, and so on, which matches what we have in the database. And we say again using request.form.get, title, author, year, and so on. Now we can ignore that and just look at the way we then the way we update it. We say book.update and then we unpack the fields. So fields is our dictionary with the update, and that's how we do that. So that's how easy it is to do an update. Next, let's say, next we have delete. So going back to index, here we have URL for delete book and a book ID. So if I hover over that, we'll look down in the lower left corner. We have the URL to delete this book with the book ID. And when I click there, it will disappear. And the book is deleted. We can go back and we can see it is no longer there. So delete is very simple. We are passed the object ID in our form. We can see here in the function. So the app route is delete underscore book ID, delete book ID. That's the parameter. And we say then book.objects.get ID is book ID. Save the variable book, and we just do book.delete. So use the delete method. And that's how easy it is to delete a book using MongoEngine. And obviously then we go back to the home page. Now, another thing that we can do is we can do a search. So that's a bit more involved, but it's good. We click here, search book, and I want a book by Amy. We're going to click search book, search results, and there we go. Floss is Cool by Amy and Ed. So the way this works, let's go to the search book, is if we look at the search book template, again, it's a bit smaller than the add and edit, but it's very similar. We have a similar form, and this time that we're doing the URL, we're executing the save search, and we post it. But otherwise, these are the fields that we can fill in. It has a few validations with the relevant names. So we have title, author, ISBN, and so on. So again, I want to search for, let's say, Ed this time. There we go. Or let's say I want, so we've Ed of the Bono. We have somewhere here, there's another Ed. Oh yeah, translated Ed and Ed Maloney. So the search function is quite simple. But the other thing we can do with the search function, which is really important, is we can say, I want something about Flask, where the author is Ed, and a search rating of a minimum 5. And then click search book. So what we'll do is we'll search for Flask, anything that has Flask in it in its title, and anything that has Ed in the author field, and anything that has a 5 or greater as a rating. And this is what we see. So that works. What happens then is, if we look at so these are the search results, which we can see here, which is similar to the index.html. So let's just go down to here, where basically it just gets the results from that book query results, and then again, there's a for loop for book and book query results items, book title, book.author, and book.year. So let's have a look at the function. So the function for the search then is, again, we're using a dictionary. And what it does is it populates, again, this variable fields with the values that we get from the form. And in this case, what we're doing is we're saving the fields as a session cookie. Now, why? Well, because we have pagination. If we didn't have pagination, we wouldn't have to do this. It would be easier. But because we have pagination, we have to save the query results. Sorry, otherwise we will lose them when we use the pagination function. And then we do, so URL for search results, which is good. Let's look at the next bit here. So search results then is, it gets the field, so session cookie, get the session cookie, place it in fields, we do a bit of validation, and then we execute the search. Now the search we can ignore most of this, and what we really need to look at, what's really important, is if we have a look at this book query results. So this is interesting. This is the magic sauce, for want of a better word. We can see we're saving it to the book underscore query results variable. What we're doing is class book dot objects dot filter. So not get and not just objects. We're actually filtering, saying, yeah, we want the objects, but we want the objects with the following filter. And what we're doing here is we're looking for title. So what we're saying is in the form title that we entered, Flask, look for it in the title field in the database, or sorry, in this collection. And we're using iContains, which basically does anything that is lowercase. So it helps us with the search function. So title underscore underscore iContains. And what we're saying is comma author. So basically it's an and. So if we enter anything in author, in form author, then we use that to search in the book collection. We're looking for anything that contains anything we entered there. Rating is a bit different because we're looking for a value of whatever we entered and greater than. But it's very simple. From form rating, look for that rating or anything above in the database in the books collection. Genre, same thing, and then order by we can ignore for now. And then we pass the results, then render template search results, book query results equals book query results, which is this here, which then goes, if we have several results, loops through them and creates the view that we see here. So that's how easy and how powerful MongoEngine is and how easy it is to use. So what we've done, we've covered, we need to create a class or have a class first of all. Then we need to create functions, which we have here on the routes, or the endpoints. And then we need to create the templates. That's essentially what we need to do. And then for read, it's very simple. We do a book dot objects to get all the objects. And then we can iterate through them or loop through them in our template. We could obviously do a filter here, but for simplicity's sake, we don't need to. For the create, we provide a form. When that form is filled in, we create a new book, instance of book here called book, with the following information that we get from the form that's filled in. And then we just do a book.save. So that's how to create something, or one way of creating it anyway. Editing, we provide again, when we click on this link here to edit a book, it gets the book ID so that we can populate these values and specified in edit book. You see here, book title, book author, book year, and so on. That's quite simple and pleasant. And then when we fill it in and make changes, it will save these to the fields variable. So basically, what we do here is it will, for that particular book ID, so we'll set the variable book objects get the book ID, save it to books, get the fields from the form, and then here we say book dot update and unpack the fields please with that update. So that's how we update the using in MongoEngine. Very easy. And delete is also, we're just in this case, let's go back to the main. We can just click here, delete. You can see down there it has the delete underscore book endpoint with the book ID. And all we do then is get that particular book, save it to book.delete method. And that's how easy it is to delete a document in MongoEngine. Search a bit more. We'll have a look at that in greater detail later on, but the main thing here is what I really want to focus on or concentrate on is this piece here. The fact that we can use books.objects.filter with any number of relevant filters to get the relevant book that we're looking for. So with that, I will say that we are done and dusted for this video. So take care.